I'm Juliet, 32 female. I live alone in a quiet suburban apartment, a small sanctuary of order and calm in a life that is often anything but. By trade, I am a private security contractor, a job that takes me to places most people only see in movies and introduces me to situations most would run from. It's a demanding career, one built on discipline, observation, and the ability to remain invisible in plain sight. This story is about the one time invisibility wasn't an option at the worst possible place: my own sister's wedding. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The invitation had felt less like a request and more like a summons. It was printed on thick, cream-colored cardstock, with gold leaf lettering that probably cost more than my weekly grocery bill. Mr. Richard Sterling and Mrs. Brenda Sterling request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their daughter, Chloe, to Mr. Alexander Vance. My name, Juliet, was a small footnote, a necessary inclusion to avoid accusations of a total family schism. My father, Richard, was a man who cared deeply about appearances, and having his estranged older daughter present was a box he needed to check. I hadn't wanted to go. My relationship with my father had been strained for years, ever since I'd abandoned the path he'd laid out for me: law school, a respectable career, a life lived in the shadow of his corporate prestige. When I enlisted in the military right out of high school, he saw it as an act of rebellion. When I transitioned into private security after my service, he saw it as a failure to launch. He just couldn't comprehend it. His world was one of corner offices and boardroom negotiations. Mine was one of risk assessments and threat neutralization. To him, my profession was a source of quiet, constant embarrassment. My stepmother, Brenda, was no better. She had married my father when I was a teenager, bringing with her a daughter, Chloe, who was everything I wasn't: bubbly, social, and obsessed with status. Brenda viewed me with a kind of polite pity, as if I were a charity case she had to tolerate at family functions. Chloe, my stepsister and the bride-to-be, simply saw me as irrelevant. We moved in different universes. Hers was a curated feed of luxury vacations and brand sponsorships. Mine was classified, confidential, and lived offline. Despite my reservations, I agreed to attend. A small, foolish part of me hoped that this event, this supposed celebration of family, might be a chance to bridge the gap. Maybe they would finally see me as an adult who had built a successful, if unconventional, life. My cousin Leo was the only one who encouraged me. "Just go, Jules," he'd said over the phone. "Show your face, eat some free cake, and prove you're the bigger person. Besides, I need a sane person to talk to." Leo was my anchor in the Sterling family storm, the only one who had ever bothered to ask about my work with genuine interest. I arrived at the sprawling country club venue feeling like an imposter. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and roses. Men in tailored tuxedos and women in shimmering gowns floated across the manicured lawns. I was in a simple, elegant, but practical dark blue dress, something I could move in, a habit I couldn't shake. I felt my father's eyes on me the moment I walked in. He was holding court near the entrance, a glass of champagne in hand. He broke away from his conversation and approached me, his smile as tight and polished as his shoes. "Juliet, you made it," he said, his tone conveying surprise. He gave me a brief, awkward hug that was more of a shoulder pat. "You look presentable." "Hello, Dad," I replied, forcing a smile. "It's a beautiful venue." "Only the best for Chloe," he said, puffing out his chest. A portly man in a loud blazer, one of my father's business associates, drifted over. "Richard, my boy, wonderful party. And who is this lovely young lady?" the man boomed, looking me up and down. My father's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. I saw the calculation in his eyes, the quick, internal debate on how to frame my existence in a way that wouldn't tarnish his image. "This is my other daughter, Juliet," he said, his voice dropping slightly, as if sharing a minor inconvenience. "A pleasure to meet you, Juliet," the man said, extending a hand. "And what is it you do? Are you a lawyer like your old man? I opened my mouth to answer, but my father cut me off with a dismissive wave of his hand. Oh, nothing like that, he said with a chuckle that didn't reach his eyes. She's in security, like a security guard. He said the words security guard with the same intonation one might use for fast food worker or janitor, not with overt malice, but with a clear, unmistakable undertone of condescension. It was a verbal pat on the head designed to diminish me, to put me in a simple, understandable, and unimpressive box for his friends. The man's interest visibly deflated. Oh, I see. Well, every place needs security, I suppose. He gave me a polite nod and quickly turned his attention back to my father, moving on to more important topics like stock portfolios and golf handicaps. I stood there, feeling the familiar sting of humiliation. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. He had stripped my career of its complexity, its danger, its honor, and reduced it to a caricature. I wasn't a contractor who planned logistics for diplomatic missions or protected high-value clients in hostile environments. I was just a security guard, a bouncer, a night watchman. The way he saw it, I was someone who checked IDs at a gate, not someone who made life-or-death decisions based on seconds of information. I saw Leo watching from across the room, a sympathetic look on his face. He started to walk toward me, but Brenda intercepted him, looping her arm through his and dragging him off to meet some distant relative. I was alone again, an island in a sea of my family's judgment. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and reminded myself why I had come, to be the bigger person. I would smile, I would be polite, and I would get through this day. But as I watched my father laugh with his friends, completely oblivious to the wound he'd just inflicted, a cold resolve settled in my stomach. I wasn't there for his approval anymore. I was there as a witness to a life I had thankfully escaped. The ceremony was a masterclass in performative elegance. Chloe, in a dress that looked like it had been spun from crystallized sugar, glided down the aisle on my father's arm. He beamed, the picture of paternal pride, a pride he had never once shown me. As they exchanged vows under a massive arch of white roses, I watched Brenda dab at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, a perfectly executed gesture for the benefit of the onlooking crowd. It was all a show, a beautifully orchestrated play where everyone knew their roles. My role, I was quickly learning, was that of the black sheep, the slightly embarrassing relative kept in the background. During the cocktail hour that followed, the whispers started. I was standing by myself, nursing a glass of sparkling water, when I overheard a conversation between two of Brenda's friends. They were looking directly at me, their faces a mixture of curiosity and pity. "That's Richard's other daughter," one of them murmured, leaning in conspiratorially. "The one from his first marriage." "Oh, really?" the other replied, her eyes widening. "What's her story? She seems so severe." "Brenda told me she works some sort of blue-collar job, a security guard or something. Can you imagine? Richard must be mortified. After all the money he spent on Chloe's education, to have one end up like that." The word that hung in the air, dripping with disdain. I clenched my jaw, my knuckles turning white around my glass. It was one thing for my father to belittle me. It was another to have his narrative parroted by strangers who knew nothing about my life. I had medals for my service, commendations for my bravery. I had protected people whose names they would only ever read in headlines. I had negotiated situations that would make their carefully constructed worlds crumble. But here, in this pastel-colored fantasy of a wedding, I was reduced to a single, dismissive label. Chloe, the radiant bride, made her rounds, and eventually her orbit intersected with mine. She floated over, her smile bright but her eyes cold. "Juliet, you're so quiet over here. Not used to this kind of crowd?" she asked, her voice just a little too loud. "It's a beautiful wedding, Chloe. You look stunning," I said, offering a genuine compliment. It was her day, and whatever my issues were with the family, she deserved to be happy. "Thanks," she said, preening. "It's been a whirlwind. Planning this was practically a full-time job, but you wouldn't know about high-pressure jobs, would you?" The jab was subtle, wrapped in a deceptively sweet tone. I mean, standing around all day must be so relaxing. Before I could respond, one of her bridesmaids, a giggling girl draped in silk, chimed in. Chloe told us you're a security guard. That's so cool. Do you get to carry a walkie-talkie? Have you ever had to tell someone you're out of here? Like in the movies. They both laughed, a tinkling, condescending sound. They saw me as a novelty, a character from a bad TV show. The complexity of my work was completely lost on them. I was a cartoon in their eyes. I forced a tight-lipped smile. Something like that, I said, my voice flat. My humiliation was complete when my father decided to give his toast. He stood on the stage, microphone in hand, and waxed lyrical about his perfect daughter, Chloe. He praised her ambi. Tian as an influencer, her impeccable taste, her ability to build a brand. He spoke of her new husband, Alexander, as the son he'd always wanted. He never once mentioned my name. It was as if I didn't exist. I was not a daughter to be proud of, so I was erased from the family narrative. As he finished his speech to thunderous applause, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Leo. "Don't let them get to you," he said softly, his expression filled with concern. "They're projecting their own insecurities. Your dad is obsessed with status, and he can't brag about your job at his country club, so he pretends it doesn't count." "He didn't just pretend it doesn't count, Leo. He made me a punchline," I whispered back, the bitterness rising in my throat. "And everyone here is laughing along." "They're not worth your energy," he insisted. "You've done things they can't even imagine. Remember that." Leo's support was a small comfort, but the damage was done. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and polite nods. I watched my father and Brenda dance, my stepsister laugh, all of them encased in a bubble of blissful ignorance. They had no idea who I was, what I was capable of, or the world I inhabited. And the worst part was they had no desire to find out. To them, I would always be just a security guard, a failed project, a living embodiment of a life less lived. I made my decision then. I would leave as soon as the cake was cut. I would slip out unnoticed, return to my real life, and put this entire charade behind me. I had endured the mockery. I had survived the whispers. I just had to get through another hour. But I had no idea that the evening was far from over, and that my two worlds were about to collide in the most public way imaginable. The wedding cake was a towering, five-tiered monstrosity, adorned with edible flowers and gold dust. As Chloe and Alexander made the ceremonial first cut, a sea of smartphones rose to capture the moment for social media. This was the peak of the performance, the final act of the perfect wedding. I stood near the back of the reception hall, using the crowd as a shield, planning my exit. My small gift was on the table, my social obligations were fulfilled, and my patience was worn to a thread. Just as I was turning to slip out a side door, my phone vibrated in my clutch. It was a restricted number, a number I knew meant work. My heart rate quickened. I never received calls on this line unless it was a Code 3 emergency, a critical, time-sensitive situation that required my immediate attention. I quickly moved into the hallway, my steps silent and swift, a stark contrast to the clinking glasses and laughter inside. "This is Juliet," I answered, my voice low and professional. "Juliet, it's Marcus," the voice on the other end said. Marcus was my handler, the calm, disembodied voice that gave me my assignments. "We have a situation. Are you operational?" "I'm at a personal event, but I can be." "What's going on?" I asked, my mind already shifting gears, pushing aside the pettiness of the wedding and focusing on the clear, sharp lines of a mission. "Operation Nightfall is compromised," he said, and the words hit me like a physical blow. Operation Nightfall was the code name for a long-term undercover assignment I had just completed 2 weeks prior. It involved infiltrating the inner circle of an international arms dealer named Julian Croft. It was dangerous, high-stakes work that had culminated in a coordinated series of raids across 3 continents. Croft and most of his lieutenants were in custody. The operation was supposed to be over, the file closed. "Compromised how?" I demanded, my voice tight. "Croft had a failsafe, A network of sleeper assets we didn't know about. They've been activated. An hour ago, they initiated a coordinated cyber attack targeting the financial infrastructure of several key political figures who funded the investigation. It's a retaliatory strike, meant to cause chaos. But that's not the worst part. I braced myself. Go on. They also have a physical target. A high-value witness who testified against Croft is being moved from a safe house tonight. We have credible intel that Croft's team knows the route. They plan to intercept the transport convoy. Your former partner, Agent Diaz, is leading that convoy. My blood ran cold. Diaz was a good man, a federal agent I had worked closely with during the final stages of the operation. He had a family. Where is the convoy now? I asked, already moving towards the exit, my mind racing through tactical scenarios. They're 20 minutes out from the city center. The hit is planned for the Aqueduct Pass on Highway 7. It's a bottleneck, a perfect kill zone, Marcus explained. Local law enforcement has been dispatched, but they won't make it in time. Juliet, you're the closest asset we have with intimate knowledge of Croft's tactics. Diaz's team is walking into a trap, and they don't know the playbook. What do you need me to do? Advise and assist. We're patching you into their communications frequency now. You need to guide them. Tell them what to look for, how to counter. You know how Croft thinks, how his men operate. You are their only advantage. Suddenly, the weight of the world felt like it was on my shoulders. Inside the reception hall, my family was dancing to a pop song, completely oblivious. Outside, a team of federal agents was about to drive into a deadly ambush, and I was their only hope. The irony was staggering. The woman they dismissed as just a security guard was now responsible for the lives of a dozen federal officers. Patch me through, I commanded, my voice firm, and get me a live satellite feed of Highway 7 on my tablet. Now. I ducked into a quiet alcove near the coat check, pulling the small, encrypted tablet from my clutch. As the satellite feed flickered to life, my earpiece crackled. Repeat, we have 2 unidentified vehicles closing fast. They are not responding to hails, a panicked voice said. It was one of Diaz's men. This is Juliet Sterling, call sign Spectre, I said into my phone's encrypted comms link, my voice calm and authoritative. I'm advising on this operation. Agent Diaz, are you on this channel? There was a moment of confused silence, then Diaz's familiar voice came through, strained with tension. Spectre, what the hell, where are you? That's not important right now, I said, my eyes glued to the satellite feed. I could see the convoy, 3 black SUVs, and the 2 vehicles boxing them in. Listen to me. Croft's men use a pincer tactic. The 2 cars you see are a distraction. The real threat will come from an elevated position. The Aqueduct Pass. They'll have a sniper. You need to break formation and accelerate now. Do not slow down. Do not engage the vehicles beside you. How can you be sure? Diaz asked, his voice skeptical. Because I spent 6 months playing chess with Julian Croft. This is his move, I said with chilling certainty. He feigns a direct assault to force you into a static position, then eliminates the primary target from a distance. Get your people out of that kill zone. As I spoke, I was vaguely aware of someone coming into the hallway. I glanced up and saw Leo, his face etched with confusion. He had clearly heard my last few sentences. His eyes widened as he saw the intensity on my face, the satellite map on my tablet. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a single finger, demanding silence. He froze, understanding immediately that this was something far beyond a family spat. This was real. In my ear, I heard Diaz shouting orders. All vehicles, full throttle, go, 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 do not stop. The dots on my screen surged forward. It was a race against time, a deadly contest being played out in real time, and I was directing it from the hallway of a wedding reception where I was considered a failure. The chaos erupted through my earpiece. I could hear the screech of tires, the frantic shouts of the agents, the unmistakable thump-thump-thump of automatic weapon fire. On my tablet's satellite feed, I saw the 2 pursuer vehicles swerve violently, trying to force the convoy off the road. But Diaz's team, following my command, accelerated past the intended ambush point just as a muzzle flash blinked from the top of the aqueduct. The sniper's shot, meant for the primary vehicle, instead shattered the rear window of the last SUV as it sped away. They had made it through the kill zone, but they weren't safe yet. "They're clear of the pass," I relayed to Marcus, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "But the pursuit vehicles are still on them. Diaz, what's your status?" "We're taking heavy fire," Diaz yelled back. "Rear vehicle is compromised but still moving. They're trying to run us off the bridge ahead." I zoomed in on the map. They were approaching the McKinley Bridge, a long, exposed stretch of road. "It's another trap," I said instantly. "They'll block the exit. You'll be caught on the bridge with no cover. You need to stop them before you get on it. Your rear vehicle is your best weapon. Have them fall back and disable the lead pursuit car." "Negative, Spectre. That's a suicide mission for that team." "It's a calculated risk," I countered, my tone leaving no room for argument. "If you get trapped on that bridge, you're all dead. Trust me. Croft's men will expect you to run. They won't expect you to fight back like this." There was a tense pause. I could practically hear Diaz weighing his options. N, a decisive command. "Johnson, you heard her. Drop back, take out the lead vehicle. We'll provide cover fire." I stood in the hushed, marble-floored hallway, a world away from the violence I was orchestrating. Leo was still standing a few feet away, his jaw slack, watching me with a mixture of awe and disbelief. He could hear the faint, tinny sounds of the comms from my phone. He was piecing it together, the authoritative tone, the tactical language, the code names. The security guard facade was crumbling before his eyes, revealing something far more complex and dangerous underneath. Suddenly, a door to my left opened. It was a utility closet, and a janitor began to wheel a cart out, oblivious to the drama unfolding. At the same time, the main door to the reception hall swung open, and a small group of guests, including my father and Brenda, spilled out into the hallway, laughing loudly. Their laughter died in their throats as they saw me. I was tense, my back rigid, my eyes locked on my tablet, speaking in a language they couldn't possibly comprehend. "Johnson, report," I snapped into the phone. "Target disabled, lead vehicle is in the barrier." A voice cheered through the comms. My father stared at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Juliet, what on earth is going on? Who are you talking to? You're making a scene." "Not now, Dad," I said, waving him off without even looking at him. My focus was absolute. Brenda stepped forward, her face a mask of disapproval. "Juliet, honestly, put that phone away. People are starting to stare. Whatever little security issue you're dealing with can wait." Just then, one of the guests, a younger man who had been looking at his own phone, let out a gasp. "Whoa, guys, you have to see this. There's a live news helicopter feed downtown. Some kind of massive police chase on the McKinley Bridge. It looks like a war zone." A few others in the group immediately pulled out their phones. A small crowd was beginning to form in the hallway, drawn by the commotion. My father, annoyed at the interruption and my defiance, took a step towards me. "Juliet, I am not going to tell you again." But he was cut off by another guest, a woman who was now watching the news feed over the young man's shoulder. She looked from the phone screen to me, her eyes wide with shock. She recognized my voice. "Wait a minute," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "That voice on the news report, the one they're playing from the police scanner. It's her." My father froze. Brenda looked baffled. The crowd in the hallway grew silent, their attention shifting from the phones in their hands to me. On one of the phones, held up for everyone to see, a news anchor's voice was filled with urgency. "We are hearing unconfirmed reports that a private civilian contractor is remotely assisting the federal agents in this incredibly dangerous high-speed pursuit. We're going to play a clip from the live communications we've intercepted." And then my own voice filled the hallway, broadcast from the phone's tiny speaker, clear and commanding. "It's a calculated risk. If you get trapped on that bridge, you're all dead." The silence in the hallway was deafening. It was broken by a single, shouted exclamation from a man in the back of the small crowd. Holy shit, he yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. She's on the news. Every head swiveled towards me. My father's face had gone completely pale, his mouth hanging open. Brenda looked as if she had seen a ghost. They were staring at me as if for the first time. The quiet, embarrassing daughter, the simple security guard, was the calm, authoritative voice at the center of a national news event. The truth was unraveling, not by my design, but under the harsh, unforgiving glare of a live television broadcast. Their carefully constructed narrative about me had just been obliterated in front of all their friends. The world seemed to slow down. The faces in the hallway, my father, Brenda, their friends, total strangers, were a gallery of shock and confusion. Their whispers and mockery from earlier felt like a distant echo from another lifetime. Now, their whispers were of a different kind: awe, disbelief, and a dawning, uncomfortable respect. My cover, not just for a mission but for my entire life within my family, was blown. My focus, however, remained razor-sharp, locked on the mission. The personal drama was a secondary concern. Lives were still at stake. Diaz, the second vehicle, will break off and attempt to create a diversion. Do not follow it. Your priority is the package. What's your ETA to the extraction point? I asked, my voice a low, steady hum that cut through the stunned silence of the hallway. 5 minutes out, Spectre, Diaz replied, his voice strained but resolute. Local PD is converging on our position. We're almost home. Don't get complacent. Croft's people are most desperate at the end, I warned. Stay vigilant. My father, Phi. Nally found his voice. It was a weak, stammering thing I had never heard from him before. Juliet, what is this? The news, they said. A contractor. I met his gaze for a brief second. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a deep, unsettling bewilderment. He was looking at a stranger. I'm working, Dad, I said simply, then turned my attention back to my tablet. The message was clear. His world, with its cocktail party judgments, was not my priority. My duty was elsewhere. Brenda, ever the hostess, tried to regain control of the situation. All right, everyone, the show's over, she said with a forced, brittle laugh, trying to herd the guests back into the reception. Let's give the girl some privacy. She's probably just part of some training exercise. But no one was listening to her. They were captivated, watching me as if I were a movie hero come to life. The news on their phones was now showing my face. A grainy driver's license photo had been pulled from some database, displayed next to the headline. Who is the mystery woman guiding the FEDS? My carefully maintained anonymity was evaporating by the second. The final moments of the operation were the most intense. The remaining pursuit vehicle made a final, desperate move, ramming the side of the lead SUV. I heard the sickening crunch of metal over the comms, followed by a string of curses from the agents. We're hit, driver is injured. Keep control of the vehicle, I commanded. Return fire on the engine block, disable it now, you're less than a mile from the extraction. The sounds of gunfire erupted again through the earpiece. The guests in the hallway flinched. One woman let out a small scream. My father took an involuntary step back, as if the violence was tangible, reaching out from the phone to touch him. He had spent his life in sterile boardrooms, dealing in contracts and figures. He had no concept of this world, a world where his daughter was not just a resident but a commander. Target neutralized, Diaz's voice finally boomed, filled with triumph. Vehicle is down, we are proceeding to the extraction point. We're clear. Spectre, you did it. You saved our lives. A wave of relief washed over me so potent it almost made my knees buckle. I leaned against the wall for support, taking my first deep breath in what felt like an eternity. Good work, Diaz, I said, my professional calm finally giving way to a hint of warmth. Get your people safe. Copy that, Spectre, and Juliet. Thank you, he said, his voice heavy with gratitude. Just doing my job, Diaz, I replied and ended the call. I disconnected from Marcus, typed a quick 3-word status update on my tablet, mission accomplished. Cover compromised, and sent it. Then I slowly looked up. The entire hallway was silent, every eye on me. The background music from the reception seemed to have faded away. Even Chloe, the bride, had been drawn out by the commotion. She stood beside my father, her perfect makeup smudged, her mouth slightly agape, the train of her expensive dress pooled around her feet like a deflated cloud. The first person to move was Leo. He walked over to me, his face a canvas of pure pride. He didn't say anything. He just wrapped his arms around me in a tight, strong hug. "I always knew you were a rock star, Jules," he whispered in my ear. When he pulled away, my father stepped forward, his movements hesitant. "Juliet," he began, his voice raspy, I don't understand, all these years. You told me you were insecurity." "I am insecurity," I said, my voice devoid of anger, filled only with a profound weariness. "You just had a very limited definition of what that meant. You heard guard because that's all you wanted to hear. It fit the story you wrote for me, the daughter who failed, the one who threw her potential away. The truth was just inconvenient for your narrative." He flinched as if I had slapped him. The truth of my words hit him with the force of a physical impact. He had spent more than a decade dismissing me, condescending to me, ashamed of me. And now, in the space of 10 minutes, he had learned that the life he pitied was one of an unsung hero. The profession he mocked was one that demanded more courage, intelligence, and grit than he could possibly fathom. It was a duty he could never comprehend, performed by a daughter he had never truly known. The aftermath of the phone call was surreal. The guests, who had previously avoided my gaze, now stared with open admiration. The men who had listened to my father dismiss me were now looking at him with a new, questioning light. Their world was built on a clear hierarchy of status: doctors, lawyers, CEOs at the top, and security guards somewhere near the bottom. I had just shattered that hierarchy. News reporters were already trying to piece together my story. My name, Juliet Sterling, was everywhere. They were connecting me to my father, Richard Sterling, the prominent senior law partner. The story was becoming irresistible. The high society lawyer's daughter, secretly living a life of action and danger, emerges from obscurity to save federal agents in a dramatic televised shootout. My phone started buzzing incessantly with notifications. News alerts, social media tags, friend requests from people I hadn't spoken to in 15 years. My father, looking utterly shell-shocked, tried to take control. "This is a private family matter," he announced to the gawking guests, his voice attempting its usual authority but failing, coming out thin and reedy. "Let's all return to the celebration, shall we?" But the celebration was over. The spell of the perfect wedding had been broken. The bride and groom stood awkwardly to the side, their special day completely overshadowed. Chloe looked at me with an expression I'd never seen from her before, not pity or condescension, but a confusing mix of resentment and awe. I had stolen her spotlight, but I had done so by revealing a depth she couldn't compete with. Her curated world of filters and hashtags seemed flimsy and trivial in comparison to the raw reality of what had just happened. The venue's manager approached, his face pale. "Ms. Sterling, there are reporters at the main gate. They're asking for you." Brenda let out a horrified gasp. "Reporters, here, this is a disaster. Richard, do something." My father looked at me, his eyes pleading. For the first time in my life, he was looking to me for guidance. He, the man of influence and power, was utterly lost. He didn't know how to handle a situation that couldn't be solved with a stern letter or a financial settlement. "I'll handle it," I said, my voice calm. This was my world now, and I knew its rules. "Leo, can you walk me out the back?" Leo nodded immediately. As we started to leave, my father called out, "Juliet, wait." I turned. He looked old and defeated. "What did you mean?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "That this was the story I wrote for you." I let out a long, slow breath. "For 10 years, you've introduced me as the one in security with a tone that said the one who disappoints me. You never asked about the details. You never cared to understand. It was easier to file me away as a failure than to accept that I chose a different kind of success. A success you couldn't put on a holiday newsletter or brag about to your partners." I looked around at the opulent hall, the wilting flowers, the stunned faces. "You value appearances, Dad." And my reality, was never going to fit your perfect picture. I left him standing there, the truth of my words hanging in the air between us. Leo guided me through the service corridors and out to the staff parking lot. My own car was in the main guest lot, now swarmed by media. "My car is over here," he said. "I'll take you wherever you need to go." As we walked, my phone rang. It was Marcus again. "Juliet, you need to go dark," he said, his voice urgent. "Your identity being public has put you at risk. Croft still has assets out there. We're moving you to a secure location until we can contain this." "Understood," I said. "Where am I going?" He gave me an address, a nondescript building downtown, a government-safe house. "A team will meet you there. We're already working on a media suppression strategy, but the cat is out of the bag. The world is watching you right now, Juliet. Be careful." When Leo dropped me off at the anonymous-looking brick building, he turned to me, his expression serious. "Jules, what's going to happen to you?" "I'll be fine," I reassured him, though a knot of uncertainty was tightening in my stomach. "This is just a new set of challenges. Thank you, Leo, for everything, for being the only one who ever saw me." "Always," he said, pulling me into one last hug. "Call me when you can." I stepped out of the car and watched him drive away, my one link to my old life disappearing into the night. As I approached the building's steel door, two men in dark suits stepped out of the shadows. "Ms. Sterling, we're with Federal Services. Please come with us." I was being escorted into a new reality. The world was indeed watching, but I was no longer just Juliet Sterling, the security guard, or Juliet Sterling, the black sheep of the family. I was Spectre, the woman on the news. My life of quiet, professional anonymity was over. As the heavy door closed behind me, I knew that the confrontation with my family was only the beginning. The biggest challenges were yet to come. I spent the next 72 hours in a sterile, windowless room that the government kindly referred to as a debriefing suite. It was a whirlwind of interviews with agents, analysts, and a very serious-looking man from the Justice Department. They needed every detail I could remember about Operation Nightfall, every nuance of Julian Croft's psychology, to anticipate his network's next move. My public exposure was a disaster for them, but my expertise was an invaluable asset they couldn't ignore. During a short break on the third day, an agent slid a tablet across the table to me. "You should see this," he said. On the screen was a press conference. The speaker was the Attorney General of the United States. He was officially commending the bravery of the federal agents involved in the shootout, and then he mentioned me. And these agents were guided by the extraordinary skill and courage of a private contractor, Ms. Juliet Sterling, he announced to a sea of cameras. Ms. Sterling's prior undercover work was instrumental in the initial capture of Mr. Croft, and her decisive actions during the ambush undoubtedly saved lives. She is a true patriot, and our nation owes her a debt of gratitude. It was surreal. The highest law enforcement officer in the country was calling me a hero. My work, which I had always performed in the shadows, was now being celebrated on a national stage. They had decided the best way to handle my exposed identity was not to hide it, but to sanctify it. I was no longer a liability, I was a symbol. When I was finally cleared to leave, I was given a new phone, a new set of keys, and the address of a new, secure apartment. My old life was gone. As I stepped out into the city, I felt like a ghost. I was famous, yet anonymous. People on the street wouldn't recognize me, but my name was now part of a national story. I had one final, loose end to tie up. I drove to my father's house, a grand, imposing structure in a gated community. I wasn't sure why I was going. Maybe for closure, maybe to see for myself if anything had truly changed. He answered the door himself. He looked haggard, like he hadn't slept in days. The arrogance he usually wore like a suit of armor was gone. "Juliet," he said, his voice quiet, "they let you go." "I was never under arrest," I replied, stepping inside. The house was silent. Brenda and Chloe were nowhere to be seen. "They went to Brenda's sister's house," he said, as if reading my mind. "The reporters, It was too much. Chloe hasn't stopped crying. Her wedding, her perfect day, is now a footnote in your story. There was no accusation in his voice, just a statement of fact. We stood in the cavernous marble foyer, the silence stretching between us. I saw the press conference, he finally said. The Attorney General, he trailed off, shaking his head in disbelief. All this time, I thought you were wasting your life. I thought you were running from the potential I saw in you, but you weren't running from it. You were running towards something else. So, nothing bigger. He looked me in the eye, and for the first time, I saw genuine remorse. I was a fool, Juliet. I was so wrapped up in my own narrow definition of success, of what a daughter of mine should be, that I couldn't see the incredible woman you had become. I wasn't just wrong, I was a bad father. I am so sorry. The apology, when it came, was simple, unadorned, and utterly sincere. It was everything I had wanted to hear for 15 years. And yet, hearing it now, I felt a strange sense of detachment. His approval, which I had once craved so desperately, no longer held the same power. I had validated myself. Thank you for saying that, I said, and I meant it. I hope, one day, you can be proud of me for who I am, not for who the world thinks I am. I already am, he whispered. Our relationship wouldn't be fixed overnight. There were years of hurt and misunderstanding to overcome. But this was a start. It was a crack in the wall he had built between us. As I was leaving, my phone rang. It was Leo. Hey, superstar, he said warmly. Just checking in, you okay? I'm okay, Leo, I said, a real smile spreading across my face for the first time in days. Things are different. Good different, I hope. Listen, I'm having a barbecue this weekend. No frills, no fancy guests, just me, my wife, and a few friends who don't care what you do for a living, only that you're good company. You should come, if you can. The offer was so simple, so normal. It was an invitation not to a performance, but to a life. A life where I didn't have to be Spectre, the hero, or Juliet, the disappointing daughter. I could just be Jules. I'd love that, I said. Driving away from my father's house, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. My family, as I had known it, had been shattered. But in its place, something new was beginning to form. A relationship with my father built on a foundation of honesty. A bond with my cousin, a bond of unwavering support and acceptance that felt more like family than any blood tie. My work was my duty, my colleagues were my trusted allies. That was a family, too. My name was in the headlines, and my future was uncertain. I had new enemies and a new, unwanted level of fame. But for the first time, I felt truly free. I was no longer defined by my father's disappointment or my stepfamily's mockery. I was defined by my actions, my integrity, and my strength. I had found a new definition of family, one forged in loyalty and respect, not in obligation and appearance. And that was a foundation I could build a new life on.